So, Lemon Twigs have been around now for about 10 years. They're the product of Brian and Michael Daddario. They're still in their early 20s. The sound is very rooted in that softer side of the early 70s rock spectrum. They're very influential, so Elton John counts as one of their fans. Today we're going to look at their fourth album, Everything Harmony. I guess the key question for me is, have they capped out on their potential? Are they too derivative of the sound, or are they finding their own way? Someone who is in his 40s and certainly hasn't capped out on his potential, is certainly not too derivative, is Al. Good afternoon to you, mate. What did you think of the Lemon Twigs? What did you think of this album?
Good afternoon, mate. Yeah, look, I thought it was pretty good, actually. I went into it only knowing the singles that had been released on YouTube, and I was pretty impressed, actually, stacking the wood this afternoon and playing the album from start to finish. So I've got a fair few highlights, but I've got an interesting conversation around too. And I chucked into ChatGTP, give me 10 interesting facts about the Lemon Twigs. And one of them was that the band's name was inspired by a tree in the backyard that produced sour fruit, which they likened to their music being an acquired taste. Now, BJ, you're a bit of an acquired taste to a lot of our fans out there, mate. But what do you think about that? Do you think they are an acquired taste?
Yes and no. Look, I think that they've got some really interesting sounds, and you could, if you look at their backstory, Brian and Michael's father was actually a musician back in the 70s themselves, and it looks as if they've been heavily influenced through that avenue, if that makes sense. For me, the reference point has always been Do Hollywood, which is their first album. So I listened to that a few years ago. So I think it came out in 2016. And I was quite addicted to that album when it first came out. I guess in terms of the album, did you have any particular thoughts on that with relation to, I gu're whether they were hard or easy to listen to?
Yeah, look, most of the albums are a real easy listen, actually, really quite enjoyable. And there's something familiar about the album too. It's almost like you've heard these songs somewhere before, yet they're quite original. I was talking to one of our fans in Launceston about that, and he kind of messaged me this morning about that. And I couldn't agree more, especially the track When Winter Comes Around. It just sounds like, geez, that sounds a real familiar kind of sound, and just a fantastic way to start an album. But I think particular songs for me, mate, I Don't Belong to Me, I think that's a cracker. Every Day is the Worst Day of My Life, fantastic. And of course, Corner of My Eye, which has been out for a little while now, are particular favourites for me, mate. What kind of took your fancy?
There's probably two categories. I mean, I think we're agreeing now that there are songs here that sound very familiar. I mean, I think that the best of them at the moment is really, really good and really original. I think In My Head and Every Day is the Worst Day of My Life are both my favourite tracks off the album. There are others that are pretty good still, like, so Any Time of the Day, or Any Time of Day, I think it's called. It felt like Michael Jackson doing We Are the World. It's sort of the B-side to that, when they all got together. So you find yourself singing to it quite a bit, but it just felt a bit strained. But obviously they can pull it off with the way in which they can vocalise things. What You Were Doing was very interesting too.
That's a great song. That's bloody good.
It isn't too bad, but it actually sounds very close to some George Harrison songs when he was in the Beatles. So it's very some of the ways in which they're vocalising some of the stuff. It actually reminded me of Don't Bother Me, if anyone is a big Beatles fan. Look, I think overall, you've got a real mix of very, very good and I think just good. Yeah, I think that's probably where I put this album at the moment. But just sort of getting to maybe the question, I mean, do you sort of see them being, in terms of being derivative, effectively a glorified covers band, or somebody who can stand on their own 2 feet?
Yeah, look, you've listened to more of the back catalogue than I have. So to be fair to the band, I probably need to listen to them a little bit more. I don't know, mate. I'd be interested in your thoughts, because I think that over time that they will be a band that will kind of be able to stand on their own 2 feet. But in terms of being locked into their kind of sound, that kind of James Taylor kind of Simon and Garfunkel kind of sound, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see where they go with the magical fifth album.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, I think they've got the potential for their best days to be ahead of them. I think that in some ways they are straddling the line. Now, I'd be interested to see if they played, this on, the easy listening AM radio for all those pensioners out there with transistor radio still listening. So whether they put a Lemon Twigs song and they'd notice, they probably wouldn't. They'd probably think it was all right, which is quite interesting. But I think that comparing where they've evolved to, and like again, my first reference was the very first album. I think that their songwriting has become a lot more cohesive, and I think that they probably are setting themselves up to being a band that you could look upon as being influential, if that makes sense. I think at the moment it's probably a bit of a half and half. The very first album was very good, but you could see that they probably did need a little bit of help in putting a lot of the tracks together. They were still in their teenagers. You could see that they're very talented in what they're doing. So both of them play drums and both of them sing and both of them play their instruments. So it's really interesting how it all comes together, especially live. But I think that there is potentially a straddling at times of what you'd call glorified covers versus being sort of a delightful homage, if you like. I guess it comes to our final rating, mate. Now I know we've probably said what we've said. I think that probably influences what we're saying about this album out of 5 stars. Where did you arrive, mate?
Yeah, look, I was pretty generous with the National last week, giving that a 5. I'm going to give this one a 4-star album, mate. I think for me, there's just a couple of little bits that don't allow it to go to that 4.5, 5-star rating. But I think they've got potential to kind of head there in the next few albums. What do you rate it?
Oh, look, I think this is probably better than 90% of the albums out there, but I think there's a little bit of too uncanny valley for me. I think that you sometimes listen to a song and go, I've heard this before, I just don't know where. I think in some ways they lay it on too thick, but having said that, the standout tracks are very, very good, and probably some of the better tracks that have come out this year. And look, I'd love to see them live, and I think that we probably shouldn't be deterring people from checking this band out, but I'm going to give it 3 3/4 stars. That famous 3 3/4 stars I tend to give albums. Can't quite give it a 4, but it's better than 3.5. So that's where I've arrived at. So that is our review of Everything Harmony by the Lemon Twigs. That wraps up another episode of Indie Miners. Please look to subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter, and let us know if there's an album you would like us to look at. So until next time, bye for now, and thank you for watching.